Hey guys, it's Max from Max Tech. I want to let you know that this review is going to be a bit different from my previous ones. Yes, I am going to harp on the Pixel 4 for its obvious shortcomings, along with some other not so obvious ones. I'm also going to let you know why this Pixel 4 is my favorite Pixel yet, and along with that, why you most likely should not buy one, but buy a Pixel 3a instead. Now, Google did send us this Pixel 4, so thank you Google for sending it out, but I have to be completely honest and say that I really can't understand what the Pixel team at Google is doing. Everybody that I know that uses a Pixel is really loyal to the brand and very hopeful for their future. Most of them want similar things, but it seems like Google isn't listening. They keep taking these big risks, trying new things, and hoping that something will stick when they could just ask the community what they want and deliver it. It's no secret that this phone is overpriced compared to the competition. Maybe Google has to price it that high due to the Soli sensor that I found fairly unreliable, or maybe the R&D that they put in, or just keep up appearances as a flagship. Design-wise, it seems like a copy of the earlier iPhone 11 renders, especially the camera bump, but on the front we have these uneven bezels that don't look as nice, at least in my opinion. Now, I personally do like the iPhone clone look, but I wish they would have just stuck with the previous two-tone design of the previous Pixels, which I think looks more unique and fits in with the brand than looking like something a bit more generic. Spec-wise, in my opinion, it is no longer a flagship, with Android competitors being so good, offering way better battery life, faster charging, more RAM and storage, much better displays, and more. Hardware-wise, Google made a few big changes that I personally like, but I think most Pixel fans would have done something different. The biggest one is ditching their convenient rear-mounted fingerprint scanner for a similar array of face unlock sensors like in the iPhone, but adding that radar sensor, and thus having a large forehead. Now, I don't like the outdated look, but I love the convenience of face unlock, especially with software that allows it to instantly go to the home screen, which is the best thing about this phone. Being someone who loves a 50mm lens on a real camera, I really love having a telephoto lens, but even still, I don't think it makes sense for them to add one after all of the talk of one lens being enough. And if we can only have two lenses, I definitely think it would make much more sense going for an ultra-wide lens, because it's much more useful. In a lot of situations, you can't back up to get a shot, or it's just impossible, where you can always digitally zoom in to grab something that's further away. I love the fact that they added a 90Hz screen, but when using it in the real world, I was a bit disappointed because it seemed like the phone was choosing 60Hz the majority of the time, and it turns out that it actually does do that, and that's a safe battery life. Now, the batteries in these phones aren't huge, and efficiency isn't great either, with the XL version getting around 5 to 5.5 hours of screen on time, and just over 4 hours if you force 90Hz in the developer settings. I can't imagine how bad the battery life is on the standard Pixel 4 that has a much smaller battery. After many years, Apple finally listened to its community and put a larger battery in the 11 Pro, and everybody loved it. Google, why can't you do the same? It seems like you keep being a year behind the competition. Why not take the biggest complaints about the Pixel 3 and focus on fixing those instead of changing your mind about previous design choices and adding new features that nobody really asked for? Why not stick with that super res zoom on the standard lens that most people are happy with and give us an ultra-wide lens instead, at least a 4000 mAh battery, ditch that bathtub notch for a 2019 appropriate teardrop notch or maybe a cutout, give us 128GB of base storage and 8GB of RAM, so RAM management wouldn't even cross our minds. The last thing that they really needed is a brighter OLED display. This one only gets up to an abysmal 448 nits. This makes it very difficult to see outside compared to other 2019 flagships that range between 1000 to 1300 nits, and in fact, the $400 Pixel 3a's display is actually slightly brighter. Maybe Google is just limiting it because of battery life, but this is not acceptable for a flagship in 2019. For most Android users, the Pixel 4's hardware is not that tempting, especially for the price, and for older Pixel owners, most of the new software will be available soon for download. In fact, the camera app is already ported, so you can download it right now on the older devices. Now, they could have made the Pixel 4 stand out more from the other Pixels, say maybe finally focusing on video performance, but nope. Still no 4K 60, apparently because of lack of space, or even 1080p 60 on the front-facing camera. The video quality is still really poor, with it using a very limiting Rec 601 color profile, which doesn't make sense because that was put out before HD video was released. And onto photo quality, other than the astrophotography mode, which is amazing, and by the way, it can be downloaded right now for other devices, the rest really falls flat. Image quality isn't bad, but Google is no longer leading the pack, with the iPhone 11 beating it in most shots, and the Note 10 being better in many as well, but having an advantage of the ultra-wide lens and way more flexibility in software. We actually did a detailed comparison video with the Pixel 3a XL, which is less than half the price of the Pixel 4, and most of the photos were almost identical. We mostly noticed more accurate white balance and contrast, which are all software related updates that will come to the Pixel 3a. In fact, the actual sensor that captures images is the same exact sensor that is in the Pixel 3 and the Pixel 3a, so they are way behind the competition when it comes to sensor performance. Now, Google is still trying to make the most out of its 2016 sensor, but it really shows since its images have visible noise and artifacting and shadow details. The software is clearly great. I just wonder how much better it would be if they took the money that they spent on the radar and put it towards the latest camera sensors from Sony. And for some more problems with the cameras, you are forced into a 1.5 times crop in portrait mode, while other phones let you capture wide shots, and even though we have the new telephoto lens, it is not even used for portrait mode shots. Instead, it uses the standard lens with digital zoom, which means lower detail in portraits, especially if you compare them to iPhone's new Deep Fusion. Panoramas are still very low quality, and for some reason the Pixel 4 takes slightly longer to process portrait shots than the Pixel 3a, which has a much weaker processor and no neural cores. Now, even with all of these complaints, I do have to say that I actually enjoyed using the Pixel 4. I love its slimmer 6.3-inch display that makes it much more comfortable in the hand, and I really like the new stock Android 10 gestures, and of course the new face unlock feature. This leads me to who the Pixel 4 is perfect for. The first group is for those that really don't care about value or having the best hardware, but more of the software experience. And the second group is for those who are using an older iPhone and want to switch to an Android. This phone is the closest Android to an iPhone ever. From the look of it, the feel, the face unlock, the gestures, the ambient display adjustment, the limited specs for the price, and much more. And in all honesty, the Pixel 4 is like an Android version of the iPhone 10 from 2017. High prices, similar performance, low 64GB of storage, RAM that is just barely enough, dual cameras now with surprisingly similar colors to the iPhone, an OLED display that is a bit too dim in direct sunlight, similar poor battery life, but with a great software experience. The thing is that Apple released that comparable iPhone 2 years ago, so if you care about value or flagship specs in 2019, the Pixel 4 isn't for you. Now, on the other hand, if you don't care about specs and you just want a great software experience with good photos, I would just say buy a Pixel 3a XL. Yes, the build quality isn't as nice, it does have a weaker processor and it's missing a few features like wireless charging, but the software experience and photo and video quality are almost identical, and the display is brighter, the fingerprint sensor works great, and the battery life is way better for less than half the price. And of course, you get a headphone jack if you care about that. So overall, the Pixel 4 has a great software experience, great face unlocking that is convenient, but it's more of a mid-tier phone instead of a flagship for a flagship price with kind of poor battery life. And if that's okay for you, you may be happy with it, but I think most people should look elsewhere, either a OnePlus, maybe an iPhone or a Samsung, or just wait another year for the Pixel 5, and hopefully Google listens to its community and focuses on what people really care about. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Max with Max Tech. Click above to subscribe and down below to enable notifications. Don't forget to check out our comparison for photos and videos compared to the Pixel 3a right over there.